Bryce. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing very well. Thank you for talking to me. I absolutely love this series. I am from Los Angeles, so Disneyland is my theme park. I've been going since I was a very young child, frequented over the years, continue to go to this day, and now cover theme parks. So it's very cool to have something like this. And I'm curious, what was your first Disney theme park experience, and what made you see what the parks could offer?
Wow. All right. I guess I'll start since I said wow. All right. I have to admit something. I did not get to my first Disney park until I was an adult and moved to Los Angeles. So I was in my 20s, early 20s when I moved here. And that was my first experience. And when I'd been to theme parks on the East Coast, my family, we didn't go down to Walt Disney World as much as I really wanted to. So I think my first experience truly was walking in Disneyland. And it was, again, unlike any other theme park I had ever been in before. It immediately captured me emotionally, just sort of being there, seeing that train, going underneath that train, going and seeing Main Street, and just that experience. I'll never forget it. So that was my first experience.
I'm a California native from Northern California. So Disneyland was my first Disney park experience. I was about 6 years old when I first went. I don't have too many memories about it. I do know my parents like to tell me that from that moment on, I was pretty much obsessed. And they had to take me to Disneyland once a year, every year from that moment on. And it just became a tradition for my family. We would drive down to Anaheim and go to Disneyland for a few days. And eventually Disney World was added to that itinerary. We started to go there when I was in my teens. And then as a 20 something, I finally got to go to Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Sea. So I love visiting our parks around the world. It's just fun and exciting, and there's just so much to see and do, and it's an incredible experience.
Did you guys always have a goal of someday working for Disney? I mean, at what point did you decide that was something you wanted to do, and what kind of a path did it take to get there?
I had moved to Los Angeles, and again, I hadn't been to a Disney park until I moved to Los Angeles. But I came out to be in the entertainment business. I wanted to be a writer and a filmmaker, and that's the career I started. I started working in television, both production and as a writer. But Disney, of course, is one of the biggest of entertainment companies, with some of the greatest stories ever told in the entertainment business. So I wanted to absolutely work with Disney right from the get-go, really first in television and film. But then as soon as I did my first Imagineering project, I never wanted to leave. So it's been now 20 years of that.
Yeah, I've always wanted to work for Disney. I started with my local Disney store about 20 years ago now. That was my foot in the door to the Walt Disney Company. And I've been part of it ever since. I came to Imagineering as an intern about 15 years ago, working with this amazing art collection. And I'm still there. So it's always been a passion of mine. And I'm honored to get to be part of that and part of the team that continues to care for the collection and the artwork.
It seems like a project like this would be kind of cool for you guys too, because being an Imagineer and working in Imagineering has so many different, there's so many different types of jobs and departments and things that everybody can do, that it seems like it might be hard to explain that to friends and family. And now you can just point them to a show like this.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree.
Well, I'm curious. The average theme park goer enjoying the parks likely takes the blood, sweat, and tears from all the work for granted, because they're just experiencing the finished product. But every little detail on any Disney property is important. So however big or small, is there something that just most excites you every time you've seen it or learning about it? Just some little detail that you think is really cool?
I kind of experience our parks differently now. I like to just go and wander, if that makes sense. I'm not necessarily there to ride a particular attraction or anything. I like to be in the place and experience it and people watch and, spend time with friends and or family. It's a nice environment to just hang out in. That's really something that I enjoy with the parks.
I do that a lot, so I completely get that. Yeah, I mean, and I completely agree. I think there's never, I never stop being curious about the parks because there's so much there. And there's these nooks and crannies that I haven't really spent time in, right? And it's just like, wow, I haven't really hung out in this part of the park before, and be that any of the parks. And some of the parks like Disney's Animal Kingdom really encourage lots of wandering down trails and things that you don't, where's this going to go? So I think what's wonderful is that we have different kinds of parks too, not just the Castle Park, but even just walking down Main Street, it's just like, oh, I hadn't really seen that before. It's so cool. And there's always those surprises.
When you know about the secrets, can you still experience the magic? Because it seems like, there might be that bit of, does it take anything away once you know how it all works?
I do think you have to put that out of your mind and just try to get yourself back into sort of being that guest sort of mind frame. Luckily for me as a writer and someone who's focused on the story the whole time, so maybe on a project for 5 years, but I'm sort of living in the story the whole time. So to me, I know there's this technology here and that crazy wall is over there and all of that, but I'm always thinking about it just truly immersed in the storytelling. So for me, I'm always sort of living in it as a real place.
Yeah, same. Once you're on an attraction, you just forget about that. You're instantly immersed in whatever that story is or space you're experiencing. For me, I'll sometimes maybe think of a piece of art that inspired the space that I'm in. So that's kind of, it doesn't detract from it. I think for me, it adds to it to go, oh, that started looking like that. And then that's what was built. So that kind of adds another fun layer for me.
Yeah. I mean, Vanessa, when you started working in the position that you're in, did you have any expectations of what you might learn from the work that you would get to do as far as, working with all of these collections of content? I mean, was the volume of it more than you ever expected?
Coming into the interview for my current role, I didn't even know what I was interviewing for. I was told it was a library, so I was expecting books, which is part of what is in the building I'm in. But on the way over there, it's the art library. It's where all the artwork for Imagineering is stored. We're now known as the art collection. So I figured it would be a lot, but I didn't know it was as much as it actually is. It's kind of overwhelming at times. There's so much history there. So much artwork has been created over the years. It's an amazing archive for sure.
Is there an attraction or land that has never materialized that you still wish could someday end up in one of the theme parks?
Boy, that's a hard one because I think that, the creative process is such that these things are never really not happening. They're always just in a state of creative process, right? I mean, that we're thinking about things all the time and pieces of one thing may end up in another thing. And so there isn't really sort of that thing that never happened. It's really just this idea that there's always things we're working on and thinking about and working towards.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of times an idea, maybe evolves. So it's not exactly what was planned, but you can see that it inspired what was ultimately built in the parks.
Is there some sort of attraction that used to be at one of the parks that you wish you could bring back if there were no restrictions to being able to do so?
I can't think of one that I would say it should come back because I think the things that may have gone there now are equally exciting, if not more so. So I think there's this, I think it's always an evolution of things and offerings. And that's what's so exciting about the work we do at Imagineering. It's always evolving into these new things.
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily something I'd want to see come back, but it would be fun to time travel back and maybe experience some things. Magic Skyway is one of those attractions I always wish I could have seen in person, gone to the World's Fair in New York and experienced that. But, I can still see the dinosaurs from that. So I'll take that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my heart will always wish that I could see the Country Bears again in Anaheim, because it's a little harder when you live in LA to get to Florida to see them.
Yeah.
Tokyo.
Yeah. Well, I love how there's sort of this running theme of, at the time this ride was imagined, the technology wasn't there yet, but, that's okay. We'll just work on it till it is. It seemed to always come together. Does it feel like, especially, when you're working in Imagineering, that you're encouraged to imagine things for theme parks that seem impossible because for the most part, everyone has learned that technology will catch up eventually?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. I think the show captures this really wonderfully. And it shows, I think, again, I go back to the Star Wars episode and think of Star Tours and just think of like they had ideas, they had technology. How do these two things come together? What's the right sequence of these things? What will it ultimately become? And I just think the show does a wonderful job of capturing that kind of discovery that happens during a project, not even before the project's begun, but you're already into it and you're trying to still discover things and figure out how it's going to go. And it's not always a straight linear line from piece of concept art and idea to attraction. There is a lot of twists and turns on that road, but we do get there. And I think that's what makes the work in Imagineering so exciting, is not necessarily knowing fully at the beginning how you are going to get there, but you are.
Yeah, and I love how in Disneyland we sort of get that representation of both sides of it. Of, Star Tours is still there, which was so cutting edge at the time as far as putting guests in that world of Star Wars. But then you also have Rise of the Resistance there, which is really literally like putting guests in the action of Star Wars. And I think it's really cool that you can sort of get to see both of those still side by side in one park.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with that. That was a fun episode for me to watch as someone, I'm not involved in that creative process. So to get to see that on screen and hear those stories being told, I was excited about that.
Is there a ride in one of the parks that you feel like you always have to go on, even if you only get to one ride when you go?
Yes. For me, it's a Grand Circle tour on the Disneyland Railroad. That's my go-to. When I go with my friends, you have to take me on the train. Like, that's what we're going to do.
Hard to argue with that. I'm with Vanessa on that one. I will try to go to one of the classics like Haunted Mansion or Pirates as well, but sometimes the lines are too long.
Yeah. For me, it's always definitely Haunted Mansion. I've always loved that ride, and it's so funny to hear the arguing back and forth in this between, is it funny, is it scary? And it's always kind of been both of those things, or sometimes it's one and not the other, depending on what mood you might be in that day.
Exactly.
And I kind of love that. For me, like, as long as I go on that ride, I feel like that encompasses so much of Disney. I feel like I can just spend the rest of the day walking around and not riding anything else, and it feels like a complete day.
Yeah, totally.
I did a churro as well.
Dole Whip, come on.
Well, and a Dole Whip. Who said you have to have
one? Is there a ride you guys haven't gotten to experience in one of the other, like, far away parks that you still hope to?
Yes. I've only been to Anaheim, Florida, and Tokyo. So I really want to go to Shanghai and ride Pirates of the Caribbean over there. All I hear are great things about it, and I've seen some photos and video, and I want to experience that in person.
Yeah, same. I want to get to Shanghai Pirates. I have not done that yet. So.
Well, I'm a third vote for that. So, well, thank you guys for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.